From the Jamaican coastline all the way to the heart of Nigeria. I'm Yashika Graham, welcoming you to this week's episode of the Ackee Pod. Our featured writer this week is Nigerian poet, journalist, and spoken word artist Soonest Nathaniel. He is the author of two collections, Burying the Ghosts of Dead Narratives, 2022, and Teaching Father How to Impregnate Women, 2018. He is also an honorary fellow in writing in the University of Iowa's International Writing Program. While in Iowa City, we spoke about poetry, what goes into crafting a poem. We spoke about his major influences and what really drives him as a writer, as well as a bit about performance. Now you're going to want to stay tuned in because there is lots to be had inside of this episode. We thank you for joining us and we invite you to like, subscribe, and continue to share as we build this space and make it a space and a resource for writers. Once again, I'm Yashika Graham, welcoming you to the Ackee Pod, interviews with writers.
So at the heel of rags, I will leave my gown as a propitiation on the floor. I will burn my innocence upon an altar, and I will learn that day once more that there is more to the meaning of light.
My name is Soonest Nathaniel. I am a poet, spoken word artist, and a journalist from Nigeria. I really live for the page and the stage in that blend. I think that's how I like to introduce myself.
So talk to me about that relationship between the written work and the bringing it to the stage.
Yeah, in the beginning was the word, like they say. You see, oral poetry is where we started off back in Africa, back in Nigeria. But you realize that the spoken word alone is not enough. And it's not enough in the sense that we need to record these things down and we need to make the word very elevated. So in a bid to leave that impact from page to stage or from stage back to the page, I had to see how to work on the craft, you know. So majorly, this is my concept. If the poem or the work works very well on the page, trust me, your delivery on the stage will be excellent. So I realized that if I work on the craft and make sure that it's very well put together, anything I want to deliver on stage will just come out flawlessly. So I had to go back, you know, from just doing spoken word, go back to learning craft, learning how to edit myself, learning how to kill my darlings, like they say, learning how to know that, okay, it's not just going to be all about punchlines, it's going to be about metaphors, it's going to be about standalone lines in the poems. You know, you need standalone lines that people go back home and think for 2, 3, 5 years. You know, you need those lines in that poem. It's not just a punchline. I mean, people can forget punchlines because they almost sound cliche, right? But a real crafted metaphor that is a standalone line in a poem, people go back and they start to write new poems from them. They start to create new works from them. That is why, I mean, that's how we got things like Things Fall Apart. I mean, can't think about it. It didn't start with Achebe. It started from something that some other person wrote in the poem. Achebe read that poem and he saw that line and be like, oh yes, Things Fall Apart will be the title of my book. Those are the kind of things and the kind of relationship I'm looking for from page to stage or from performance, you know, to writing it down in a page. I think that's what I have about that thought.
I think what I try to do sometimes with my work is to see how I can reach that same level where my works, my poems become parables, prophecies, prayers, and psalms. Because when we go to church, as a Seventh-day Adventist, we go to church on the Sabbath. The Sabbath is Saturday, not Sunday. And so when we go there, the hymns, the inspiring hymns, were so very poetic. And that was where I started to think of how to add rhythm and sound to my poetry. So you can tell that all this had influences on the things I did.
You mentioned Chinua Achebe.
Yeah.
Tell me about some other persons who might have influenced you in this writing journey.
Beautiful. Apart from, I wouldn't start from the West. Let me start from back home. They say charity begins at home. My major influences are, number one, that's the guy who I call Christopher Okigbo. Christopher Okigbo is about he's my biggest inspiration. And this is the reason. I think when he writes, there's a level of spirituality he attains. There is a level of wordcraft that he puts into it. There is something different from just what the normal language is that Okigbo brings to his work. It's the kind of work that makes you want to go and carry a gun and go and, start a revolution and fight against injustice. It's that kind of work. That is the kind of work Okigbo was doing, and it really inspired me coming up. The next person who inspires me from back home is Esiaba Irobi. Esiaba Irobi is he's late now. He used to be a poet, a dramatist, and this is why I love Esiaba Irobi. He blends poetry with drama, and that's the kind of hybrid forms I'm trying to look into. So those are the kind of influences I have. Of course, you wouldn't hear me call Achebe and Wole Soyinka, and the reason is because I think they are gods, and they should be left alone in where they are. When coming back to the West, you have people like Bruce Boston. I write African speculative realism and speculative poetry. Who introduced me to speculative poetry was Bruce Boston. He's right there in Florida, and his work that introduced me to speculative poetry the best is titled I Build Engines. And you see, one of the lines, like I said, standalone lines. I can't forget that line. It says, I build engines from the lines of battles regardless how they are drawn. I studied that line for 5 years. Yeah, is that crazy? So along the line, you have people like Rita Dove, you have Maya Angelou, you have Sylvia Plath, Emily Dickinson. I mean, the reason I love those ladies is because they bring back the empathy of the work. They bring back that human self. They bring back that that humanity in the work. It's not just writing for erudition. It's not just writing to be brilliant. It's in them I find how the head meets the heart. That's what I find. It's in those ladies that I learned that the head must meet the heart. Brilliance must meet compassion. Brilliance must meet passion in that work. And those are just a few of the people who, influence my work.
Wow. Oedipus Revisited. I swallow the yellow and purple pills again, and the child returns, but this time not to wail by the window. The child rises from his watery crypt, pulls his father from the bed onto the concrete floor, and drags his papa by the hair through the blue door. He throws his father along the corridor, asking for a name, asking for his mother, longing for breast milk, yearning for water, seeking blood to fill his empty veins. But his father has no answers. His father holds no reply. This is not the place to weave another lie. Fear writes the truth in the white of his vacant eyes. The child wants a body, something beyond the poor mix of mash and blood. This boy wants a mommy, something scared, something sacred more than God. But how will this child be made to understand that a woman learned how to sit comfortably inside a burning bush? So they accused her of defiling God, shaved her hair with broken bottles, and banished her to the wilderness of dogmas. What becomes of this child who has no ears, when his mother cries in the grave cold night? When she craves for mouth to suckle her breast, whose tongue will console her?
All right, so a few things. One thing you mentioned was the importance of the line. And when you talk about the importance of the line, we see how a poem can become powerful when you focus on giving strength
to the lines.
Each of those
of
lines.
course.
So in that vein, talk to me about your process. Like, where does a poem begin?
A poem begins for me from reading, usually. Majorly, it begins from reading, and I don't have my book here. I carry a book in which I jot down standalone lines, and that's one of those processes. I really wish I could show that book here. I write them in so different colors, so I use a couple of pens, black, red. The purple ones are always my most beautiful ones, So what I do is I load that page with all my standalone lines, and this is how it comes about. I could be walking and I see something written. I could be walking and hear something, and then what I do is I change what I've heard or what I have read to something that suits my own writing or something I think I want to use later on, and then I write that line to become my metaphor. So in penning those lines down, when an inspiration for a full poem comes, I am not out of lines. I start the poem and then I realize, oh, this poem comes in here, and this is why it comes in that way. I studied maths and computer science, so I work first as a scientist. I do the research. That's my research process. Read, jot down inferences. So in that process, those are my inferences. Now, when I want to formulate the theorem, I bring some of those inferences, test them in the real process, and then if they hold water, and by holding water, it means do they flow with the rhythm? Do they flow with the theme? Do they flow with the aesthetic of the poem in general? If they do, then that's how I fashion it into a poem that I want to present to the world. So it's that crazy process. And I really love the fact that I have to go through science, because I used to think that my study maths and computer sciences was a waste, but in that research process, it now helped me say, oh, this is what that whole thing has taught you, how you can go back to research properly. From reading a historical book, from reading a psychological book, you are bringing metaphors from different places and you're churning them out. And then when it's time to write that poem on whatever theme you're focused on, you just have the lines, you put them, fix them together. Because don't forget, a poem is a found thing. You find it, you create it, you discover it. All right.
I feel like I could talk to you forever. Okay, I'm gonna do one last question. I want to ask you what keeps you excited about poetry.
Yeah.
There's this passion that oozes out of you, and like there is. I've called you the president.
Oh Lord, have mercy.
I have, because there's this energy that you have that is, there's like a strength in how you stand in the world and how you speak when you stand to speak. Occupy, it feels like you really occupy all of yourself. And then when you speak your poetry now, that's like a different kind of level, right? So I am curious about what brings Soonest Nathaniel to the world in this way.
Yeah, I think all my life I have been searching for purpose. I have been searching for what endeavor really brings my purpose to the fore. Why am I here? And I realize from all my endeavors, from all the things I have done, it is poetry. It is what I have been assigned to do. I mean, I don't like to always gravitate towards it, but poetry is a spiritual process. It's a very deep thing. It's a very deep spiritual process. We can try to water it down all we like, all we can, but even in the watering down, we find how deep, the depth of it. We find how it comes from within you. It brings out all of you. I think that's what I have been looking for purpose. I have been looking for what is that thing, not just to make a name. What is that thing with which I can impact the world? That's why the poetry becomes important to me. Because in writing poems, I mean, this is, and I've been teaching this as somehow you are just the medium by which the poem comes out. But you see, this is the point, that why you are important is that somebody reads that poem somewhere far beyond the Atlantic. You are just in Nigeria. Somebody in Europe reads it and reaches out to you by mail and say, thank you for your poem. That's purpose. You have been there for something more than yourself. I think that's what I've always wanted to be, something more than me. Of course, it will reflect my own self and everything later on, of course, but something bigger than myself. I've always been looking for what was bigger than me. Why am I here? What am I supposed to deliver to the world so that the world can know that I was here? Purpose. I think that is why when I stand to present, when I write, I want to write in that sense that people must find the true essence of the words. People must find the true essence of my existence. That's the way I can say, yes, I gave my all to this world. Because that is the world. I want to die empty. That is me.
Wow. Because I watched my umbilical cord grow into a tree. Because the tree grew into a road, and the road is always hungry. Because I witnessed the bat turn into an old woman and the mob bayed for blood. Because the bush baby cried at our gate and the landlady did not wake from sleep. Because I saw the boy spread his school uniform on an invisible clothesline. Because he picked it back and put back his ears after it was chopped off. Because the toes danced after the axe lost his head. Because the girl had the gift of pyrokinesis. Because the fire engulfed her entire family. Because their heritage became carbon. Because carbon can never be innocent. Because no story is innocent. Because the children turned into tubers of yam after picking coins on the road. Because the yams bled when caught with a kitchen knife in preparation for supper. Because one returned with a scar where the knife had made an incision. Because the tree did not yield no fruits, yet it was home to strange birds. Because the birds were fed with nothingness, and they filled our roofs with droopings.
So final question. There is this very powerful poem you wrote about your mother. And I'm sure you have more, but I don't know if you can remember the one that you shared here.
I was born by a woman who sees like a man?
Yes.
Ah.
So I want you to talk to me about the significance of women in your writing and in your lineage, your poetic lineage, your life lineage, and how you engage with women and yes.
I've been blessed with a mother, 2 sisters. I've had nieces, many cousins who are women. And I think the introduction to literature proper was by my mother. She's the storyteller of the family. And she was there when, and I've told this story timelessly, at the time when my father needed to go find himself and be the man who can support the family, that woman alone, single-handedly, took care of 3 children alone. If you know Nigeria, in the days when we grew up, it is one of the most arduous tasks anybody could accomplish. Buy them clothes, pay for school fees, pay for house rent, be there, even for the man who's not around, praying for him, supporting him, still taking care of the children. So it's from that background that this whole poem about the woman and my mother and the appreciation, because, and I love the fact that I like to tell it again, because when my father eventually came back after having to study, because he went to study to upgrade himself, when he came back, he says to me, and I can't forget, I don't care about your money or anything you achieve in this life. I just care about how much you treat this woman as the, as the queen, as the goddess, as the great woman that she is. And that is something that I'm glad they told me when I was way younger. Both of them tried to make me understand that there is a value that not just the mother, the woman brings. And I've seen it even in my life, marriage and everything. There is a value, great value that the woman adds, an existence that she adds, to the growth of the community, to society at large. My mother would come to me and talk to me, and I think that's why I grew up old, because she would come to me, apart from telling stories, she would tell me about life in a way that nobody, even my father, could never have talked to me about it. So from that age, I had already started to imbibe, understand a lot of things about life that my mates would not even understand. So most of the things I am today, she forged that man. So you can imagine, it's the woman who forged the man. It's not necessarily the father who was there. When you say, oh, you need a father. The woman single-handedly, to a great extent, forged the man to become. She would send me to buy pepper. She would send me to buy meat. I go to the slab where the butchers are. So she made me do all this work. I would stand by her side when she's cooking. My God, I'd be like, I'm not your husband, but she taught me all those things. And that's where you also learn compassion. That's where you learn to be. The woman has that way to teach you to be down to earth. Realize that your value is in the good. In fact, there's a line, I think, for every woman loved, the earth finds a reason not to die. Yeah, so because they give us more than we can ever think about. I mean, the woman gives it all. When she comes in, she practically, I mean, back home from where I come from, she's practically taking nothing else. She's giving all of herself. She's working, she's caring. I mean, till now, as a grown man, married with kid, if my mother had the way she would bat me, she would say, you're not batting well. Think about it in that light. What else is love and affection? What else is compassion? What else is, grace? What else encompasses that apart from what I had gained from my mother? And then this woman was not a poet or anything, but she would buy those books, and those are the books that really got me. She would just buy them. I can remember her say that there is no frigate like a book. Yeah, she was not a poet, but of course she read 1 or 2 things, and then she would say that, and then I started reading the books. She would just use her own little money. I can remember how much this woman would not buy clothes for herself, but would buy me new uniforms. I was always clean in school. And, I became a prefect because, that boy is always neat and clean, Think of those things. The sacrifice It's priceless. I can't lie to you. It's something I saw. It's something I want people to see. In fact, one of the things I wrote when I was coming here was in the name of my mother. So I came to the IWP in the name of my mother, that the world may know this woman who introduced me to so much beauty, so much love, so much of what the world should be. I think it's a story I can't tell I can tell forever. It's a story I can't finish telling, because there will always be a new layer. There will always be something that she did. There will always be something that I remember, and it's just priceless. It's priceless.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is the perfect way to end.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's what we have for this edition of the Ackee Pod, Interviews with Writers. Thanks to you for tuning in, and thanks to you for continuing to engage with this podcast. Be sure to leave a comment, to subscribe, to like, and to share. Yes, share. Thanks to our featured writer this week, Soonest Nathaniel. And we, of course, invite you to join us again next Monday for a brand new episode, episode 4. And we'll soon let you know who is featured then. All right, so stay tuned to our Instagram page at Wild Current Studios, and stay tuned to this channel, Wild Current Studios 22 on YouTube. Until we meet again, I'm Yashika Graham for the Ackee Pod, Interviews with Writers.